Let's go to our final topic, and that's Wolfsburg. They're playing Mainz, and really the topic shouldn't be just Wolfsburg. It should be Wolfsburg and Mainz. Here is a crazy stat for you. Over the last 5 match days in the Bundesliga, Wolfsburg are third and Mainz are fourth. This is a proper top match, Stefan. This is a match between two teams that are in excellent form.
The real top spiel. Why won't the DFL give us the fixtures that we want?
Yeah, I mean, Wolfsburg have really kind of blown me away over the last 180 minutes. The performance against Leipzig, we mentioned, right? Then they go play midweek in the Pokal against Hoffenheim, which was a little dire on the ranks. There was almost no one in the stadium, which, is a completely different debate that goes beyond what the two teams showed on the field. But, you can debate about whether Wolfsburg and Hoffenheim should exist as Bundesliga teams until the cows come home, as you like to say. But at the end of the day, they are here. And Ralf Hasenhüttl has Wolfsburg playing some really great football. And you can say the same about Bo Henriksen and Mainz. They play really good football at the moment too. And so I actually think it's going to be a really good football match.
Yeah, I think so too. I actually posted on Blue Sky after the German Cup game that, Wolfsburg have now lost just one of the last 10 games, and the return of Ralph Hasenhüttl is in full effect, and I had a few Southampton fans get in touch saying they're glad to see him doing well. Obviously, Southampton are sinking like a stone in the Premier League, and I think a few of their fans would be delighted to have him back at the club, including Alex Stewart, actually, who's one of the brilliant minds behind Tifo Football, actually. So that was a good kind of exchange, and I completely agree. Hasenhüttl's such a fascinating person because he left Germany as this kind of impressive head coach who was off to take on the world. He went to Southampton, and there I think he really struggled to kind of come to terms with the money in English football, with the demands of English football, with, a club that wanted to play a certain way rather than just win football games, which I think he's very good at doing. And I actually wrote a newsletter about him when he returned to Wolfsburg, talking about his disillusion with football after he left Southampton, and he'd openly talked about how he might actually retire instead of taking on another job. And, regardless of what people think about Wolfsburg, I've got no real qualms of people questioning whether they should be a football club or not. I do appreciate that they do stick out like a sore thumb in the kind of landscape of German football, but it's just nice to see Hasenhüttl winning games again and getting his dues. I think he's a great head coach. I think he's a head coach that German football's kind of overlooked over the last kind of couple of years. I think he would have been a great head coach at a number of the kind of top 4 clubs, top 6 clubs. I don't think he's. I think he's. At Dortmund, for example, could have really used him over the last couple of years, for example. So I think Wolfsburg want to watch the day they managed to convince him to pull up at that spot just outside Berlin, and God knows where he lives. I'm assuming he lives in Berlin, but who knows? I'm sure Volkswagen have got some pretty swanky houses that they've put him up in nearby.
Lower Saxony is nice, Stefan. There's some really beautiful countryside.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, of course. So I'm sure he's not struggling for a nice accommodation, but yeah, he's kind of figured this team out. There's 3 players in particular that really stand out to me that I think are really worth noticing. The first one's actually Bence Dardai, who, of course, son of Paul Dardai, one of 3, I think, active players in the Dardai family. He moved from Hertha in the summer, and he's been on the bench more or less for the full season, but he got thrown in against Augsburg in matchday 9 as this kind of box-to-box player, and he's just been on fire. He's totally grasped this opportunity. He scored against Heidenheim, picked up an assist against Union Berlin, and he picked up an assist against RB Leipzig last weekend. And, German under-19 international, he looks really, really, really impressive. I'd be fully expecting him to start in this game. And, going from strength to strength, and it's just a testament that Hasenhüttl knows what he's doing there. The other one as well, I think, is worth mentioning is Mohamed Amoura, who was on loan in Belgium, did really, really well in their top flight, picked up 17 goals in 23 games for, now this is the club I always mistake, Union Saint-Gilloise? Yeah, French is a made-up language, so I'm afraid I can't really do much. I know it's technically not French, but it's French adjacent. So, Anyway, he did really well there, and he's come back and he's really doing particularly well. He's been tossed up front in place of, some of Wolfsburg's kind of more traditional kind of forwards like Jonas Wind, Kevin Behrens, stuff like that, and he's doing really, really well. He's picked up 4 goals and 6 assists in 10 Bundesliga games this season. He also got a brace against Leipzig. He's doing very well in terms of scoring his chances and getting into chances. But what I love about him is that he's quite happy to take on players. He's quite happy to set up goals as well, because he's more of a second striker who's been played as a number 9. So he's bringing in other players, which don't think it's a coincidence that when he plays Thiago Thomas, the kind of left winger, tends to do particularly well as well, who I think is also having a really impressive season so far. So, I think what we're seeing here from Hasenhüttl is that he's just kind of slowly but surely getting a feel for the squad, and because he's a good head coach, it was only a matter of time before he realised who his best players were, which ones did the right jobs for him, and we're kind of seeing him build this squad and the starting 11 in real time, and that's why they're slowly climbing up the league table. But curiously enough, it's almost entirely in away games, because they still only won one home match. And I think he complained after the first home game about the Wolfsburg fans not really getting behind the team, which, the jokes write themselves there, obviously, about that stadium and their fans. But yeah, away from home, only Bayern have picked up more points. And I suspect we'll probably see them pick up another 3 points in this game.
It's actually, there's a really fascinating story there too with Wolfsburg at the moment, that there was complaints ahead of the season that the squad was too big. They have 32 players in the squad at the moment, right? And that they, you mentioned it here, that it was a struggle for him to find the right players, which, when you look at, for example, let's look at the center forwards, for example, they have Bialik, Behrens, Nemcha, Thomas, Wind, Amoura. That's just the center forwards under contract at the moment, and you really can only play one of them, right? I mean, Thomas sometimes plays on the wing, as you said, and that works. I think actually works better for him. So maybe it's wrong to list him as a center forward, but there's a lot of players there that you have to tell match in, match out that you're not playing, right? It's the same in midfield. The collection of central midfielders alone, Gerhard, Arnold, Swanberg, Vranks, you can add Özcan to that list as well, right? That's a lot of players. Then Bence, Dardai, it's a fascinating story. He might be the first of the 3 to pick Germany rather than Hungary, right? Because they're all allowed to play for both. There's a lot of players there, and you look at defense. I mean, you can look at through the entire squad. There's a lot of players available. And then they had this injury crisis. Maya is out, right? Paredes is out. Vranks is out with an injury. Ruggiero, the left back, is out with an injury. Bornau is out with an injury. One of the goalkeepers is out with an injury. Bialik is out with an injury. And it's almost like that kind of helped him to sift through the players that he needs. So maybe find out that some of these players maybe work better in the system that he's playing with. And of course, the big task for them, and this is a big story this week, is that someone like Jonas Wind, for example, is probably now for sale, because it's just not for the hygiene of a dressing room. Having 32 players under contract is just too many. If half of them are out injured, then you can kind of manage that, because you don't see them in day-to-day operations. But the moment they all come back and are fit, like, where are you even going to put them all, right? And I think that is a big task, but it almost feels like that Hasenhüttl found out a little bit with help through the injury bug to which players he can rely on, which players he cannot rely on. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they're going to kind of go through that squad maybe in January and say, well, we still need you, and you, and all of you other guys we're maybe going to sell.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot of kind of players in that team who've got like big reputations but haven't really been doing it for a while now. You can even mention, for example, Maxi Lacroix, the centre defender who's been pushing for a move for a while, who's left for Crystal Palace, obviously. Was it permanent deal or a loan deal? I can't remember. I think it's a loan deal. I can't remember. But yeah, you can absolutely add, guys like Kevin Behrens, even Lucas Nemcha, I think. As you said, Jonas Wind, even Lovro Meyer, for example, who hasn't really kind of flattered to deceive since he made the move to Wolfsburg. Just a lot of big names on probably big salaries that Wolfsburg just don't need. And, the guys like Amoura, I know Thiago Thomas isn't really a young guy. I suppose he is actually still 22. And obviously, as we mentioned, Dardai, these kind of younger players coming through are kind of showing that Wolfsburg don't really need the big signings anymore. Though these guys have all came in to the lesser extent, they haven't really lived up to the hype. And Hasenhüttl's just doing what he's always done, which is kind of identify the right players and build the right squad. And he seems to be well on his way. But we'll have to kind of see what happens in this game in particular because, as I mentioned, not that long ago, Wolfsburg have more or less exclusively picked up their points away from home, and they are at home against Mainz. And if I'm not mistaken, Mainz actually have a really impressive away record themselves. They're fifth in the table in terms of away points. So this is actually going to be a really big test for Wolfsburg, and it'll be interesting to see if they can start coupling that away record with the home form because, like I said, they've only picked up one home win this season, but that was their last home game against Union Berlin, which is an absolute dreadful match, which they won 1-0. I think there's like 3 shots on target between both teams, but win's a win. And if they can pick up a win against Mainz here, it'll definitely prove that Wolfsburg are on the straight and narrow under Hasenhüttl.
As I said, a really good Mainz side. I just wanted to add one more point about the squad size. We had this discussion, right, on the Substack this last week about salaries, and VfL Wolfsburg are owned by Volkswagen, who saw a decline in their revenue, which they still at the end of the day, their margins are still in the plus, right? This is still a company that is highly profitable, but the profit margins go down, and we all know in hyper-capitalism world that we now live in, a decline in profit margin is a terrible thing, Stefan, so we need to fire as many people as possible right away. This is what Volkswagen is going through right now. It's a hugely controversial debate within Germany. The company is healthy, but rather than securing the workers that during COVID made a lot of concessions to the company, rather than giving back some of these concessions, it now looks like workforce cuts, which is, if you are a football club that is owned by Volkswagen, a company that's making cuts. And we had this discussion on the chat, right? And I went and looked at some of the data. This Volkswagen-owned team is still the team with the 5th highest salary in the league. And at the end of the day, you can't really go and have that many players employed and not have success on top of that. So at least they're checking off the success box. But yeah, I think that is actually a really important point to make here, that in times like this, I don't think VfL Wolfsburg can afford to have a salary that is just below the team that won the championship last year, right? So success is A, important, but B, also I think as there is cuts in the car industry, I think this is also a team that managed by Hasenhüttl that's probably going to see cuts as well.
Yeah, and it's a club that prior saw major cuts after Dieselgate, something that's kind of been overlooked, that Wolfsburg had their issues from a sporting point of view, but they were also kneecapped since Dieselgate, and went from being a team that could potentially challenge the Bundesliga to a team that had to basically make do with a budget that, when you combine their wage budget and their transfer budget, is probably maybe like 5th or 6th best in Europe. I know the wage budget's obviously very high, but they don't typically spend as much money as other clubs do. But you know what? Maybe that's a blessing in disguise as well. Maybe less is more in the sense where they've got a head coach in there who can get the best out of the players that they have, and maybe they just have to keep putting more emphasis into signing young players that Hasenhüttl can develop, rather than just kind of blowing money on bigger names. But it'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on for sure, because they're a fascinating club. Maybe not for all the right reasons for a lot of German football fans, but they are an interesting kind of wrinkle in German football.
Absolutely, and their match on Sunday, I think, is going to be a nice palate cleanser to end the match day. I'm really looking forward to it, and as should everyone else listening to this podcast.